Floyd, what size shoe do you wear?
Well, 13.
That's large. Paul, what size do you wear?
10.
10. All right. Linda, what size do you wear?
7.
A little petite sole back. Pat, what size shoe do you wear?
10.
10. These are 11s. You know what? No matter what size shoe any of us wear, whether it's a 13 to a 6, every one of them is exactly the right size for your feet and to put your foot in your mouth. Never fails. I have had my feet in my mouth so many times, it's not even funny. Amy might even be listening to this. She wants to know what I'm going to say today. How many of you all have ever said something really, really dumb? How many of you have done it in the last 48 hours? Yeah, you know. Or the older I get, this is where I find myself, something that comes out wrong. I know what I want to say, but that's not what quite comes out of my mouth. And over the course of the years, I have said so many dumb things and things that were just plain wrong, I've kind of gotten used to it. I listened to Daphne talking about Abram and Sarai, and I would have had to think so hard to get those names right, because that's not something I'd come out with Abraham and Sarah. That's the way it would come out, because that's the way I normally, talk about it. But we all sometimes say things that don't come out exactly right. And to be honest with you, for me, it's very encouraging to know that other people, everybody, makes the same kind of mistakes. It kind of makes me feel normal, whatever normal is, instead of like the big dork that Peter had to feel like after he's encountered Jesus in this morning's passage from St. Mark. Hear the words coming from Mark 8:31 and forward. Then he began to teach them that the Son of Man must undergo great suffering and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and after 3 days rise again. He said all of this quite openly, and Peter took him aside. Now see and listen to Peter. And Peter began to rebuke him. Think of somebody having chutzpah enough to shake their finger in Jesus' face. And he began to rebuke him. But turning and looking at his disciples, Jesus rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things." And he called the crowd with his disciples, and he said to all of them, "If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel will save it. For what will it profit them to gain the whole world and forfeit their life? Indeed, what can they give in return for their life? Those who are ashamed of me and my words in this adulterous and sinful generation, of them the Son of Man will also be ashamed when he comes into the glory of his Father with the holy angels." That's powerful stuff. That's very, very powerful stuff. To know that God can and will turn his back on some people. But it's encouraging to me to know that someone of Peter's stature and importance there in the early church could walk the walk of a Christian so well, and at the same time have one foot just shoved way down into his mouth. We got to remember that Peter was human, and even the greatest humans in the world make mistakes. Henry Ford, everybody knows who Henry Ford was. He changed the world. He changed how things were assembled. He changed how things were marketed. He changed how we travel. But did you know that in his very first car that he invented and made, he totally forgot to put reverse gear in there? He'd go forward, but it wasn't going backward. Might help some. I won't say that. Be a help when you're trying to parallel park. Not only that did he not put reverse in it. After he got it built, he realized the garage that he had built it in, the door was too small, and he couldn't get the sucker out. It was just right there, so he had to cut through the door frame, open it up, make it larger, and if you go to the Henry Ford Museum, you can see that place where his first car, the garage it was in, had to be adapted so he could get the car out. Well, I give thanks every day, and I suspect you do too, that we don't have to be perfect to experience God's grace. We don't have to be perfect to experience His forgiveness, and we don't have to be perfect to experience the new life that He gives us through Jesus Christ. He doesn't expect us to be perfect because He knows there was but one. What does He expect us to do? He expects us to try. And in this passage, we hear this in-your-face, scathing rebuke from Jesus to Peter. Now get the picture. Jesus had just changed Peter's name from Simon to Peter. He had changed his name from Simon to the rock. The rock upon which Jesus would found and build his church. Peter had to be feeling like, yes, I am there. He had to feel like a champ. And he's on top of the world. And the future for Peter at that particular moment had to be bright and sunny. And then Jesus says, but whoa, Peter. Whoa. And he starts talking about how he's going to Jerusalem and how he's going to be crucified. And the bright and sunny world that Peter had all crumbled down and it became gloomy and cloudy right before Peter's eyes. So Peter took Jesus aside and questioned Jesus and took him to task for talking like that. And Jesus rebuked Peter where? Where did he do it? Did he do it off to the side where nobody could hear it? Or did he do it publicly? He did it in public. Now, those of you that have people working for you know you don't reprimand your folks, your employees, in front of the other employees. Am I right? You know, that's just not a good thing. You don't chastise your children in front of the other children. You take them aside. But Jesus reprimanded and rebuked Peter in front of everybody. And he wanted to get his point across that he was now, Jesus, focused on the cross. And in that rebuke, that focus, he hoped would become so evident. Jesus reminded Peter that the purpose of Jesus' ministry was not comfort. Jesus didn't come to give us all a nice bed to sleep in. Jesus came for what? To give us salvation and to bring to you and to me and history in between then and now and until he comes back. That salvation, friends, means the cross. So, with that story there, what does this passage teach us today? How do we apply it in our lives? Is it going to keep me Is it going to keep you from saying dumb things and making dumb mistakes? It might you. I can pretty much tell you it's not going to keep me from saying dumb things, but it teaches us some very important lessons about following Jesus, about being his disciple, and about bearing our own crosses. First, and this is so hard, it reminds us that you and I are not the center of the universe. That's the very first thing that the cross always should remind us of. And yet, in my instance, and I suspect for you too, that's the hardest lesson I have to learn. Our world is eaten up with people who think that the whole world revolves around them. And you know what? Those people are still living in the infancy stage of faith. And they're still living in the infancy stage of life. Because when they think the world revolves around them, they just haven't looked around. Calvin and Hobbes, in one cartoon, Calvin said, the whole world is just wrong. The whole world is wrong. They all think the world revolves around them, and Calvin said, and everybody knows the world revolves around me. That's the culture. That's the society we live in 2015. Who's it about? It's all about me. The focus of Christ on the cross, and as we read for the next 4 or 5 weeks through Easter, changes that attitude of it's all about me. The cross changes us. And when we hear the rebuke and accept the rebuke of Peter as our own and look at the cross and focus on it like Jesus, then we become less like the world, it's all about me, and more like our Savior, it's all about others. Mother Teresa one time heard of a family, a mom, 9 children, and they were starving to death. So very rapidly she got together enough rice and food to take to their house, and enough so that they could prepare a meal. And she knocked on the door, and the lady let her in, and Mother Teresa went in and handed her a huge bag of rice. And the lady didn't start boiling water. She didn't pour the rice out into bowls and divvy it up. What she did was she took that bag of rice and she poured it all on the table. Then she got a meat cleaver and she put it right in the middle. And half of it went that way and half of it went that way. And Mother Teresa didn't quite know what was going on and asked her what she was doing. And the lady told her simply, she was going to take half of that to a family where she knew there were children starving to death. That's seeing things through the lens of Jesus as he focused on the cross. That cross reminds us that we are not the center of the universe. It also calls us to be part of a brotherhood and a sisterhood. It's gender-free. It doesn't make any difference what we are. We're called to be people of the bruised shoulders. Jesus calls us to a life of discipleship, a life that begins with the empty tomb and responds to the good news of salvation by asking us to do what? Hoist that cross. Take up that cross and become the people of the bruised shoulder. In medieval Europe, it was common for devout Christians, and it still is in some places today, to pray for the marks of the crucifixion on their hands and on their feet. What's that known as? Who can tell me?
Stigmata.
Stigmata. I knew y'all knew. Y'all were so smart, I don't know why I even bothered. It was a sign of deep spirituality, and it was a sign of special favor from God. One night while praying that he would receive those marks, a young monk in France had a vision of Christ with another mark on his body. It wasn't the nail wounds in his hands, nor was it